The diplomatic disaster. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the shuttle's viewport, watching the rust-colored surface of Skirith Prime grow larger beneath them. After 18 months of preparation, humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Skirith Empire was finally reaching its destination. The crystalline formations jutting from the planet's desert surface caught the light of its twin suns, creating a kaleidoscope of refracted colors that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. "Nervous?" asked Captain Morrison from the pilot's seat, his weathered face creased with concern. "Terrified," Elena admitted, adjusting the ceremonial sash across her diplomatic uniform. As Earth's leading xenobiologist and the mission's cultural attaché, she'd spent every waking hour studying Skirith customs, language, and social structures. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. This first contact would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained isolated on the fringes of known space. The shuttle descended through Skirith Prime's thin atmosphere, approaching a sprawling complex of crystalline spires that seemed to grow directly from the desert floor. The Imperial Citadel was a marvel of bioengineering, its living walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that served as both structural support and communication networks. Elena had read about the Skirith's unique blend of biological and technological advancement, but seeing it firsthand left her speechless. As they touched down in the central courtyard, Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the crystalline walls, she could see figures moving, tall, graceful forms that seemed to glide rather than walk. The Skirith delegation awaited them, arranged in a perfect ceremonial formation that spoke of military precision and ancient tradition. The airlock hissed open, and Elena stepped onto alien soil for the first time. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, making each step feel deliberate and weighty. The air carried an exotic perfume of spices and something that reminded her of ozone after a thunderstorm. But it was the sight of Empress Therijin that stopped Elena in her tracks. The Skirith ruler stood at the center of her delegation like a crimson goddess. Nearly 8 feet tall, her skin was the deep red of garnets, marked with intricate silver tattoos that seemed to shift and move in the strange light. Her eyes were pools of liquid mercury, alien yet undeniably intelligent. She wore armor that appeared to be grown rather than forged, its organic curves flowing seamlessly with her powerful frame. This was the warrior empress who had unified 3 star systems before her 30th year, and her presence radiated authority like heat from a star. The greeting ceremony began according to the protocols Elena had memorized. Ambassador Chen delivered the formal words of greeting in carefully practiced Skirith, while Elena provided cultural context and linguistic support. The exchange of gifts proceeded smoothly. Rare earth minerals for Skirith memory crystals, each item presented with the precise ritual gestures required by thousand-year-old traditions. Elena felt a surge of relief as the ceremony neared its conclusion. They had successfully navigated the complex web of Skirith etiquette without incident. Then Empress Therijin approached the memory shrine, a crystalline altar where the ancestors' consciousness fragments were said to reside. The ritual viewing was the final act of the greeting ceremony, a moment where the Empress would commune with her forebears to receive wisdom about these new visitors from Earth. The memory crystal pulsed with inner light as Therijin placed her hands upon its surface. Elena watched in fascination as the Empress's silver eyes rolled back, her consciousness merging with the ancient neural patterns stored within the crystal. The air itself seems to thicken with psychic energy, and Elena felt a strange tingling at the edges of her mind, the telepathic overflow from the communion. That's when disaster struck. A harmonic resonance from the shuttle's cooling systems created a frequency that interfered with the memory crystal's delicate neural matrix. The crystal began to crack, its stored consciousness patterns fragmenting like glass. Without thinking, Elena lunged forward and pressed her bare hands against the crystal's surface, trying to stabilize it with her own bioelectric field, a technique she'd read about in theoretical xenobiology texts but never attempted. The moment her skin touched the sacred crystal, the world exploded into silence. Every scarith in the courtyard froze as if struck by lightning. The psychic backlash hit Alina like a physical blow, flooding her mind with alien emotions and memories that weren't her own. She saw flashes of Scarith history, ancient wars, moments of triumph and loss, the slow evolution of their civilization from tribal nomads to galactic empire. For a terrifying instant, she wasn't Alina Vasquez anymore, but part of a vast collective consciousness that spanned millennia. Then reality snapped back into focus, and she found herself on her knees before the now stable crystal, her hands still glowing with residual psychic energy. The silence stretched on for heartbeats that felt like hours. When Empress Therogen finally spoke, her voice carried across the courtyard like the rumble of distant thunder. "Tashka Morneth," she whispered, and Alina's blood turned to ice water. Even without her translator, she recognized those words from her studies. Sacred violation committed. High Priest Veltar stepped forward, his ancient features grave with ritualistic authority. By touching the memory crystal unbidden, the human has committed Tashka Mor, the deepest sacrilege known to our people. According to the law of sacred honor, established 2,000 years ago by Emperor Skaljan the Unifier, this transgression demands immediate blood payment. Alina struggled to her feet, her legs shaky from the psychic feedback. "I was trying to help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The crystal was fracturing. I couldn't let your ancestors' memories be lost." Silence. Empress Therogen's command cut through the air like a blade. She studied Alina with those mercury eyes, and Alina could feel the weight of an alien intelligence taking her measure. The Empress was deciding her fate, and Alina realized with growing horror that her diplomatic mission had just become a death sentence. Finally, Therogen spoke again, her words carrying the weight of imperial decree. "The law is absolute. The offender must face ritual combat unto death." Alina's heart stopped. "Or enter sacred bond marriage with the royal house within 10 solar cycles." The twin suns seemed to dim as Alina processed the ultimatum. Marriage or execution. 20 Earth days to prepare for a wedding she'd never wanted to a woman who clearly considered her a barbarian. Ambassador Chen's face had gone pale as parchment, understanding the magnitude of what had just occurred. "The choice is yours, Dr. Vasquez," Empress Therogen continued, her tone formal and cold. "But choose quickly. The sacred bond ceremony requires extensive preparation, and I will not delay justice for the convenience of human squeamishness." Alina looked around the crystalline courtyard, at the alien faces watching her with mixtures of curiosity and disgust. Her diplomatic mission lay in ruins, her life hung in the balance, and her only path to survival ran through a marriage to a being who could snap her neck with one hand. But as she met Empress Therogen's mercury gaze, Alina made her choice. "I choose the sacred bond," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Something that might have been approval flickered in the Empress's eyes. "So be it. You have 10 cycles to prove yourself worthy of joining the royal bloodline. I suggest you use them wisely." As Alina was escorted to the preparation chambers deep within the crystalline citadel, she couldn't shake the feeling that her real test was just beginning. The next 20 days would determine not just her survival, but the future relationship between two vastly different species. And at the center of it all stood Empress Therogen, alien, magnificent, and utterly unknowable. The preparation chamber was a study in alien luxury. The walls were living crystal that shifted from deep burgundy to soft amber depending on the light, and the furniture seemed to have grown from the floor itself. Alina sat on the edge of what she assumed was a bed, though its organic curves bore little resemblance to human furniture. Her hands still tingled from the psychic contact with the memory crystal, and she could feel foreign thoughts fluttering at the edges of her consciousness like half-remembered dreams. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Alina looked up to see Empress Therogen enter without ceremony. The ruler had exchanged her ceremonial armor for flowing robes that somehow made her appear even more imposing. Her silver eyes swept over Alina with undisguised assessment. "So you choose marriage over an honorable death," Therogen said, her English precise but heavily accented. How very human. Elena stood, trying to maintain some dignity despite her circumstances. I choose life over meaningless death. I'm sorry if that offends your warrior sensibilities. The Empress's lip curved in what might have been amusement or contempt. My sensibilities have kept this empire stable for centuries while your species was still discovering fire. Do not presume to lecture me about honor, soft skin. Then teach me, Elena challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. If I'm to be your bride, shouldn't I understand what that means in your culture? Theragen studied her for a long moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Very well. But understand this. Scarith marriages are not the romantic partnerships of your species. They are bonds of power, duty, and genetic compatibility. You will be expected to bear strong children, support my reign, and die for the empire if necessary. Are you prepared for such responsibilities? Elena met her gaze steadily. Are you prepared to be married to someone who might challenge your assumptions about strength and honor? For the first time, Empress Theragen smiled, a predatory expression that revealed teeth slightly sharper than human normal. This may prove more interesting than I anticipated. From enemies to lovers. The next days blurred together in a haze of impossible trials and cultural immersion that left Elena exhausted in body and spirit. The Scarith concept of marriage preparation was unlike anything in human experience. Part military training, part academic examination, part spiritual journey. Elena was expected to master combat techniques that had been perfected over millennia, memorize genealogies stretching back 2,000 years, and undergo physical modifications that would allow her to survive in Scarith society. She failed spectacularly at most of it. The combat training left her bruised and humiliated. Scarith warriors moved with fluid grace that seemed to defy physics, their enhanced reflexes and telepathic awareness making them nearly impossible to predict or counter. Elena's human training in self-defense felt pathetically inadequate against opponents who could sense her intentions before she acted on them. Pitiful, Theragen observed as Elena collapsed after her third consecutive defeat in the practice ring. My youngest nephew shows more promise, and he's barely past his first molting. I'm a scientist, not a gladiator, Elena gasped, struggling to her feet despite the pain in her ribs. Science will not protect you when enemies breach our borders, the Empress replied coldly. When our people cry out for defense, will you offer them research papers? The cultural studies proved equally challenging. Scarith society was built on principles that seemed fundamentally opposed to human values: strength over compassion, duty over choice, collective needs over individual desires. Elena struggled to understand how a civilization could function when personal happiness was considered not just irrelevant, but actively harmful to social stability. Your democracy sounds like chaos, Theragen declared during one particularly heated discussion. How can anything be accomplished when every citizen believes their opinion matters equally? Because every citizen's life has equal value, Elena replied firmly. Even the weakest voice deserves to be heard. Theragen stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. Weakness serves no purpose except to drag down the strong. This is why your species remains confined to a single star system while we rule three. Yet despite their philosophical conflicts, Elena began to notice cracks in the Empress's seemingly impenetrable facade. Late one evening, as they practiced the ritualistic vows they would soon exchange, Elena caught Theragen staring out at the stars through the chamber's crystal windows. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to choose your own path? Elena asked quietly. The Empress turned those mercury eyes on her, and for a moment, her mask slipped. Choice is a luxury for those without duty, she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. I was born to serve my people, to carry the weight of their expectations. Personal desires are irrelevant. Are they? Or is that just what you've been told? Something shifted in Theragen's expression. Vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit trapped by circumstances beyond their control. They stood in silence, Two reluctant souls bound by ancient laws neither had written. The breakthrough came during a crisis that had nothing to do with their impending marriage. A mining accident in the outer settlements had trapped dozens of Scarith workers beneath tons of collapsed crystal formations. The rescue teams were struggling with conventional methods, and time was running out. Elena studied the geological surveys with growing excitement. The crystal formations aren't random, she explained to the emergency council. They follow fault lines in the planet's magnetic field. If we can generate a harmonic resonance at the right frequency, we can destabilize the obstruction without causing further collapse. Human theories, scoffed General Kethfor. We should use plasma charges to blast through. That would kill everyone trapped below. Elena protested. The harmonic approach is safer. Safer, but untested. Therogen interrupted. What if you're wrong? Elena met her gaze steadily. Then I'll take responsibility for the failure. But if I'm right, we save lives that your plasma charges would destroy. The Empress considered for a long moment, weighing military tradition against untested human innovation. Finally, she nodded. Do it. The next several hours were the most intense of Elena's life. Working with Scarith engineers who barely trusted her, she calibrated harmonic generators to produce the precise frequencies needed to destabilize the crystal matrix. The margin for error was nearly non-existent. Too little power, and nothing would happen. Too much, and the entire mining complex could collapse. When they activated the generators, the crystal formations sang with otherworldly music that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the obstruction cracked along predetermined stress lines, creating safe passage to the trapped workers. The rescue was completed within hours, and Elena found herself surrounded by grateful Scarith families whose loved ones had been saved by human ingenuity. But it was the look in Therogen's eyes that meant the most. Respect, perhaps even admiration, for a form of strength the Empress had never encountered before. You turned weakness into victory without spilling a single drop of blood, Therogen said as they walked back to the Citadel. I'm beginning to understand why your species survived long enough to reach the stars. Sometimes the strongest victory is the one where nobody has to lose, Elena replied. That night, for the first time, they shared a meal in comfortable companionship rather than tense formality. Therogen had ordered traditional Scarith delicacies, patiently explaining each dish's cultural significance and the complex relationships between food, honor, and family loyalty that governed Scarith society. On Earth, we have a saying, Elena told her as they sampled fermented Karish fruit. The way to someone's heart is through their stomach. Humans have many strange sayings, Therogen replied, but she was almost smiling. What about Scarith? Any food-related wisdom? Velka nesh morani. Share your meal. Share your soul. It's why betraying hospitality is considered the deepest dishonor among our people. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their respective worlds. Elena learned about Therogen's childhood training in the warrior Critches, her struggles to prove herself worthy of the throne despite being considered small by Scarith standards. The Empress listened with growing interest as Elena described Earth's diverse cultures, her work preserving endangered languages, her dream of becoming a bridge between civilizations. You speak of your world with great love, Therogen observed. Don't you love yours? The Empress was quiet for a long moment. I love my duty to it. Whether that's the same thing, I'm no longer certain. As the conversation wound down, they found themselves sitting closer together, the vast chamber suddenly feeling intimate rather than imposing. When Therogen reached for her cup, her fingers brushed against Elena's, and neither pulled away. Elena, Therogen said softly, using her name for the first time. Tomorrow is our wedding day. Are you having second thoughts about not executing me? The Empress laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. Perhaps. You're certainly more trouble than I expected. Good trouble or bad trouble? Instead of answering, Therogen leaned closer. Her mercury eyes searched Alina's face as if trying to solve a complex equation. "I don't know yet," she whispered. When their lips met, it was tentative at first, two strangers exploring unfamiliar territory. But as the kiss deepened, Alina felt something fundamental shift between them. This wasn't duty or political necessity. This was choice, desire, the first genuine connection they'd forged across the void of their differences. When they finally broke apart, Theragin's crimson skin had darkened to a deeper red. What Alina was learning was the Scarith equivalent of a blush. "Perhaps," the Empress said quietly, "this marriage will not be the burden I feared." Their wedding ceremony was a spectacle that would be remembered for generations. Alina stood in modified Scarith ceremonial armor, its living metal adapting to her human physiology, while Theragin wore the crown of stars, a crystalline diadem that made her crimson skin luminous in the cathedral's ethereal light. As they spoke their vows in the ancient tongue, something profound passed between them. These weren't just political words anymore, but promises made by two individuals who had chosen to find strength in unity rather than division. "Neshka vel Morani," Theragin said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "My strength becomes your strength." "Morani vel Neshka," Alina replied, her pronunciation careful but confident. "Your strength becomes my strength." When the high priest pronounced them bonded, their kiss was met with thunderous approval from the Scarith nobility. Alina realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped caring about the politics and started caring about the woman in her arms. Their wedding night began with nervous formality, but as they sat together in their shared chambers, the awkwardness gradually dissolved into something deeper. Theragin had shed her ceremonial crown, her silver hair falling loose around her shoulders, and Alina found herself mesmerized by the way moonlight played across the Empress's crimson skin. "I've never been with a human before," Theragin admitted quietly. "I've never been with anyone like you," Alina replied, and the Empress understood she meant more than just her species. When Theragin reached for her, her touch was surprisingly gentle for such a powerful warrior. They explored each other with careful reverence, learning the geography of unfamiliar bodies, discovering that passion could transcend the boundaries of worlds. Theragin's skin was warm silk beneath Alina's fingers, and when the Empress whispered her name in the ancient Scarith tongue of lovers, Alina felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of intimacy. Their lovemaking was both tender and fierce, a perfect metaphor for the relationship they were building together. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined beneath sheets that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, Alina realized that her diplomatic mission hadn't failed after all. It had simply taken an unexpected form. "What happens now?" she asked, tracing patterns on Theragin's chest. The Empress considered the question seriously. "Now we prove that different forms of strength can coexist. Your people and mine have much to learn from each other. Think it will work? A marriage between species." Theragin's smile was answer enough. "We've already made it work, my Alina. Everything else is just diplomatic paperwork." As the twin suns rose over Scarith Prime, casting their joined silhouettes against the crystal walls, Alina knew that her life had changed forever. She'd come to this world as a scientist and diplomat, but she was leaving as something new, a bridge between civilizations, a translator of hearts, as well as languages. The crimson ultimatum that had threatened to end her life had instead given her a future she'd never dared imagine. And in the arms of an alien empress who had become so much more than a political necessity, Alina finally understood that sometimes the most important discoveries couldn't be found in laboratory or library. They could only be found in the courage to love across the vast distances that separated souls.